Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Unity or Death podcast. We did a double feature last week, and then I kind of went into overdrive mode planning this little event right here that I'm sure y'all are sick and tired of hearing about because I won't shut up about it, but it's been going great. We got a lot of things coming through. We finally got a lot of the permits and everything totally settled out, which has been mayhem. And, articles coming out about how the FBI is apparently worried about the event for some reason. So yeah, it's been an interesting week, but I actually wanted to bring somebody on in relevance to obviously the current events that are going on in Afghanistan and kind of all of the weird takes and conspiracies and goofy stuff that's going around with that whole situation. Someone who's actually going to be speaking at this event. And I want to welcome on the one, the only, the legend, Mr. Scott Horton. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing good. I'm so sorry I'm late. I went overtime being interviewed on the last show, BSing after the show with the guy. I totally forgot about this.
Hey, no worries at all. Like, we're usually at least 15 minutes late, so just what's 15 minutes more? It's no big deal.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to all your viewers too, but I'm here now, so what's the dang deal?
Yeah, so obviously, like with everything that's been going on in Afghanistan, everybody's kind of talking about a lot of the obvious questions of like, oh, how could have this happened? And are we going back in? And like, how did we lose all of this stuff and everything? But there's a lot of weird stuff that's kind of going on the side. And I was going to kind of run through a couple of these and just kind of see what your take is on it. If this is just like some dumb conspiracy theory that's going to be repeated for the next 30 years, or if there's actually like things to some of these stories that are coming out. And yeah, just kind of get your take on it.
Sure.
Yeah. So the main one that's kind of been going around that I'm super interested in with kind of the background of how we use money over there. I don't know if you've seen all the videos coming out of just pallets of cash being left around and like the Taliban, like posting videos on like TikTok and Twitter of just pallets and pallets of US dollars sitting there. And
well, I hadn't seen that.
Oh yeah. Okay. So there we go. So we can figure that out ourselves right here. Do you have any kind of theory on how something like that would happen? Because I figure, like, obviously with MRAPs and guns and stuff like that, that's a little harder to destroy. But you think they just light the money on fire? They wouldn't just leave like millions of dollars. I think the report just came out that we left $86 billion worth of like cash assets in Afghanistan. Is that like something we gave to the warlords?
I'd have to see the video. You're saying that this video is from American military bases?
No, so this is literally, I might even be able to pull it up on the stream. This was literally like the Taliban just in some building, and there's just piles of cash on the ground.
Right, but in some building, I'm saying that belonged to the U.S. Army, or that belonged to some local warlord who was on the payroll of the U.S. government.
So yeah, that's part of the kind of the question is like is this U.S. military? Is this like warlords and they left it behind?
Yeah,
a lot of people are like conspiring on if this is like a bribe or something. Like,
well, I mean, the way you framed it at first made it sound like they left this behind at a military base just carelessly. Why wouldn't they at least burn the money as they're leaving it behind or whatever? But now that it's really in question who's they here, right. I would presume that would be local warlords or local, maybe foreign corporation type, private interests operating in the capital city who realize, or in other cities, who realized they had to get the hell out of town and had no time to grab their money and bring it with them if it's a pallet of cash.
Right. Yeah. And I got
probably that sounds to me like, if I was just guessing, who would have had pallets of cash to leave behind, especially if it's, giant piles of American cash. I guess I could see it being the State Department, and that's their bribe everybody this month allowance, kind of a thing like that. And that got left behind.
Yeah. Because I think one thing that's kind of getting lost in all this conversation, even Joe Biden obviously glossed over this fact of kind of the corruption in the ANA and how like a lot of these soldiers were claiming that they hadn't been paid in months, and kind of just like the whole weird situations going on with the Afghani National Army. So I don't know if there's anything you can like touch on with that.
No, look, I mean, the Afghan National Army has always been a Potemkin village. I mean, the whole thing is basically a put on. And, the commanders, I mean, I don't know. They've done a lot of fighting and dying in the thing too. But, the commanders is essentially run a racket in a way that you couldn't get away with in America, at least for very long, where the officers at essentially every level are just completely corrupt. And so you have, the ultimate manifestation of this is the phenomenon of the ghost soldiers, where there are entire army divisions that don't exist other than so that their colonel can make money and cash all of their paychecks and keep all the money for himself. But then it goes down in the
that sounds like,
paperwork.
yeah, it sounds like a crazy American Ponzi scheme, but it's U.S. defense dollars in Afghanistan.
Right. And then the way it pans out is it's like Hitler ordering armies that no longer exist into battle, as these divisions aren't real. They're not there. They're a figment of people's imagination. And, the way Biden put it, he said, obviously this could be worse, but he's saying, how can you expect Americans to fight and die for the Afghans when they won't even fight for their own country? Right. But that's not what was going on there. The ANA, they weren't fighting for their country. They're fighting for our country, right? Against some of their own countrymen. So the people who are involved in that, they don't have any morale as like, yeah, come on, we're going to go fight for our country against the Taliban. They don't think that. They never thought that. They're there for a pair of boots and a rifle and with no allegiance to the central government that a foreign occupying power created in their country. Why would they? And it's also important that, there are really, powerful divisions between people in South and Eastern Afghanistan and up in the north. And there are Pashtun regions up in the north as well, near Kunduz especially. But, you have Tajiks and Uzbeks and Hazaras from the north of the country who don't even speak the same language as the Pashtuns at all, right? So it isn't like I was having people from Oklahoma. I'm reusing my same analogies from my interview with Max Blumenthal from 20 minutes ago right now. I'm sorry. It's not like people from Oklahoma occupying people from Texas. It's like people from Mexico occupying the people of Texas. We're just not going to tolerate that. What I mean? That's how different the populations are from each other.
Yeah, a lot of people think there's some form of like Afghani nationalism, and it just doesn't exist. Like a lot of people in the country don't even acknowledge the borders that are there, let alone like this vague concept.
And look, they pretend that the Taliban is some foreign invasion force from beyond the moon or something like that. But no, they're not. They're some of the men of the Helmand and Kandahar provinces and Nangarhar province. And I don't know them all, but, mostly in the north and the east of the country along the old Durand line, where the British drew that border between Afghanistan and Pakistan to divide this, tribal population, this ethnicity from themselves and each other back in the first place, back in the 19th century. And, look, this is what why the whole war has been a complete failure from the beginning, or destined to be a total failure from the beginning, right? Like, let me make a comparison to Iraq War II. In Iraq War II, for a very long time, you could say that if it wasn't for the Americans, the people in power in Baghdad right now would not be in power at all. They would have to dissolve. But after a certain point, that was no longer true. After a certain point, America had successfully installed the Shiite factions in power in Baghdad. And by successfully, mostly, I mean, they had helped them cleanse all the Sunni Arabs out of the capital city. And so now from Baghdad east and down to Kuwait was all essentially predominantly Shiite territory, including all of the capital city. And so that was a sustainable result. The Sunni Arabs lost the civil war. By the way, the Shiite winners then told the Americans, now beat it. Thanks for everything. And now you can get the hell out, and made George Bush sign on the dotted line to leave. But at least you can say that the parliamentary government, such as it is, parliamentary and whatever, that George W. Bush installed in power in Baghdad, that's the same government that still reigns there. Right. So that was a sustainable result after all of that bloodshed in a way. But in Afghanistan, it's not like that at all. In Afghanistan, they've been fighting for a coalition of 10 to 20% minority groups against the 40% plurality of the population. And so it's really like 20-20-20, the Hazaras, the Tajiks, and the Uzbeks. And we're trying to force their regime on the Pashtuns. And in pretty much that explicit of an identity politics kind of way, especially when you look at the form of the army as being essentially like a Tajik army. And so and then the Pashtun population of the country, they don't have any real political representation other than the Taliban, because their local warlords, their Pashtun warlords who are part of the national government, that doesn't give them representation. That just means that their local warlords have more power because they're tied to the national government. That just means they're more oppressed than before and want to fight more than before. And then the Taliban come and say, we'll fight for you. And then the more they fight, the Americans do what? They just crack down and crack down and crack down. And the more they crack down and escalate their war, the more regular people are driven into the resistance. And then, by the Obama years, they sold this counterinsurgency policy on the idea of winning the hearts and minds of these people. Again, based on, they never really said it this way exactly because it's just too damn stupid. But they were essentially pretending that the Taliban were foreigners, that they weren't Afghans, that they weren't from there, that we were from there. We were fighting for the Afghan people. And the Taliban, they were the invaders that we were trying to protect the people from. But that's not just a damn lie. It's really stupid and wrong, right? So then they go into the Helmand province. Really, you're going to send men into battle on the idea that once we kill these guys, we're going to make their women and children love us. And once we're done annihilating them, then the non-combatant men and the elders and the women and the children, they will come to see us as their true protectors, their true security force, their very best friends, the American Army and Marine Corps.
Yeah, then we prop up local warlords that rape their kids and stuff, and
we're going to the other way. Right, and we're bringing this Urdu or whatever it is. I don't even know which is which there. Dari and Urdu speaking Tajiks and Uzbeks to come and be your overlords in our place. So once we win your hearts and minds, we're going to also transfer that loyalty directly onto these people from 500 miles away who, essentially look like Chinese, while you're from forever away.
That brings up a really good question that I don't see too many people talking about, and it might be because it's irrelevant. I don't know. You can tell me that. Of the Northern Alliance kind of like popping back up recently with like their so-called leader guy, whatever, like getting in front of cameras and the media and saying that they're going to like come back and fight the Taliban and everything.
Yeah, writing in the Washington Post about it hilariously.
Yeah. So is there any teeth to that? And then I guess the second part of that question I could add on to it is I've been very critical of people saying that we're pulling out of Afghanistan, because I genuinely believe that we're only pulling out like obvious military forces, and we're still going to flood the place with CIA contractors, special operations and stuff. If the Northern Alliance like is like a real thing and that's not just some media conjures, is that an angle for us to stay in the country and keep fighting the Taliban even though we technically pulled out?
Yes. So the real first question is, will the Taliban take over the Panjshir Valley by negotiation and overwhelming force, unapplied, but just the threat of it now? Or is there going to be a long drawn out thing? I mean, essentially, Patrick Coburn wrote a great piece about, you got to understand the Taliban's recent victory over these past few weeks has been mostly a political victory rather than a military one. They come to town and they go, look, that we could kill all you all, but we would rather just accept your surrender. We'll give you total amnesty. Let's be friends from now on, but you acknowledge who's boss. And then they shake hands and then they move on to the next town, the next military base. They invade a military base and they say, hey, you guys, here are the terms of your surrender. Give us your rifles and we'll let you go home. And they go, okay. And they give them their rifles and go home.
Yeah, because
they're not lined up and shot, and they're not imprisoned in some filthy dungeon. And they've announced an amnesty for all former government officials. So they're trying to make it easy on themselves. They're clever, at least, if you want to put it that way. And so they've just swept the whole damn country. I mean, a huge part of their strategy was head them off at the pass. You want to have a Northern Alliance? We're going to take the North first or second. So once they started moving, hardcore to seize the provincial capitals and outright claim rulership over the different Afghan provinces, one of their very first targets was Kunduz. And then they went to and took Mazar-e Sharif and all of these places up in the north of the country. So how are you going to have your Northern Alliance now when we already control this territory? And the last holdout in the whole country is the Panjshir Valley in the far north of the country near, I think, the Uzbekistan border. And you have, Shah Massoud's son and a guy named Mohammed Atta Noor, and who's a powerful warlord from, I think that's where he's from. And I forgot the other guy. And then the Taliban are saying right now, as of the last tweets I saw from journalists who were right on top of this stuff, they said the Taliban right now are suing for peace, and that a delegation of elders from the Panjshir Valley went to Kabul to meet with them. And so this thing might be over without a fight at all. But on the other hand, if there's going to be an American project to back anybody, that's the game right there, would be, to back them in insurgency against the Taliban. But honestly, man, that's such sore loser behavior at this point.
I mean, I don't know if you saw what was announced just like, I think it was like an hour ago, but Biden is publicly announcing that he's debating drone striking weapon caches across Afghanistan that we left.
Oh yeah, no, they've already been carpet bombed them. Yeah, no, they've been carpet bombing them with B-52s. They've been bombing, because they left all this equipment for the Afghan National Army. Which, look, if they had taken it and destroyed it all, then they would have been blamed for the Afghan National Army folding because they took all their weapons away, right? But here they left them with their weapons, and the Afghan National Army just gave them all over to the Taliban.
The Vice News released a documentary just yesterday because they were working on one in Afghanistan, and obviously all this happened, so they released pieces of it. And they had a journalist that was standing right with I forget their name, but they wear the skull mask and everything. It's like the CIA-trained Afghani special forces that we put so much money and equipment into. And it just shows them running away all the way back to the perimeter of the airport, and then just like leaving the vehicles running, leaving their rifles in the vehicles and walking to the airport because they talked with someone in the Taliban and were like, okay. And then just gave up and left. Yep. It's like, and that's like, that's our special forces in that area.
Put on a t-shirt. Yep. Off they go. So it's, a totally political decision. Why fight and die? You guys already lost. It's over. And, the French call it a coup de main, right? One big successful surprise attack. We just take over the whole damn thing. And in this case, with minimal casualties relative to, worst case scenario type behavior, if the, bitter fighting had continued all this time. And now listen, what you say about, oh, well, they're going to leave air power and they're going to leave mercenaries and CIA, whatever. That ain't just your opinion, man. That's in the New York Times. That's the plan, right? But so here's the way I'm looking at that. And this is like all in the realm of just opinions and speculations and shit like that. But the way I'm looking at that is like this. The war this whole time has been to protect the government in Kabul, to prop it up in power, and to keep the Taliban essentially at bay. And now that war is over. That government no longer exists, and the Taliban rule the capital city and a hell of a lot more than that. Everything but this one last little readout in this massive coup de main where they've succeeded in that. So what's left then is either way, what's left is by abandoning the Kabul government, then that means that what's left is a counterterrorism campaign. But that means excluding the Taliban. The Taliban ain't terrorists. They're the sovereign government. They're the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Their army divisions or their infantry divisions are fighters. They're not terrorists, not by this, conception and definition, right? They're governments now. As Bill Clinton said, terror is killing and robbery and coercion by people who do not have state authority. Right. So the Taliban,
I love the dividing line there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the Taliban, now that they have state authority, they're not the terrorists, but the terrorists are any old friends of Osama, supposedly, any Arab international terrorists, maybe Chechens, if you got some somebody that they can pretend is like an Al-Qaeda, a potential Al-Qaeda or ISIS type threat to the United States of America.
And didn't the Taliban run ISIS out of Afghanistan, and didn't we help
Oh, yeah,
them
they
do that?
Yeah, they annihilated the hell out of them. They hate their guts. And, the ISIS guys had beheaded a bunch of the Taliban guys, and they picked a fight that they could not win there. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, listen, 1 year ago, it's in the Washington Post that JSOC, as they put it, were flying as the Taliban's Air Force, flying drones as air support for Taliban fighters on the ground against ISIS in the Nangarhar province. We pulled our Green Berets out of there. We sent Taliban in to finish up that fight there with the JSOC, embedded with them there. And then, man, all of the rumors about Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, as far as I can tell, are total crap. And they say they killed this one Egyptian Al-Qaeda propagandist guy. And I got to admit, I didn't go study up everything I need to know about the guy to find out just how bin Laden tied he was in the first place or not, or whether they even truly killed the son of a bitch there that when they said that they did or any of that. I don't really know. I guess I'm willing to just give them one on grace and because I'm lazy. Fine. But here's the problem. Show me two Egyptians. Show me any Al-Qaeda, any Saudis or Egyptians or any Arabs as part of Al-Qaeda, friends of bin Laden or Zawahiri, tied to that group who have come to Afghanistan and embedded with the Taliban and hung out with them and whatever the hell, worked with them, fought with them, done suicide attacks with them. There's just nothing like that. And you go back 10 years to Leon Panetta when he was the Secretary of Defense, or I can't remember if he was head of CIA at the time. But on Meet the Press, he admitted that, we don't think there's more than 50 Al-Qaeda in the whole country. In other words, there are no Al-Qaeda in the whole country. You can't find one damn dead Arab to kill, to hold up his scalp and say, see, we found an Arab. You can't even find one. They're gone. They got away. Bush let them get away in 2001 is what happened to them. And that's over. So now, as you said, they're bitter enemies with this, so-called Afghan ISIS group, which if you want, you can ask me about that in a minute. I'll tell you some crazy shit about where that came from.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, so they destroyed all that. And then what are the claims that they're friends with Al-Qaeda there? It's all just a bunch of crap. And,
20-year out-of-date crap in a lot of cases, like ancient history shit.
No, but, so some of it new, but it's still total crap. So the United Nations keeps putting out these reports. Like if you search in Google News, Taliban and Al-Qaeda, they'll go, aha, the Taliban is back in Al-Qaeda still because it says so in these UN reports. Well, then click through, man. Have the patience and the curiosity. Click through and read the UN report. And it's nothing but a bunch of crap. Well, member states inform us that Al-Qaeda is there. Really? Like, you're not even going to tell me, like, in which neighborhood of Jalalabad they supposedly are hanging out in? You're not even going to say anything? That's what you got from me. Is the CIA told you to tell me that, yeah, Al-Qaeda's there somewhere, trust me. That's it? That's all you have?
Right on time. This was a couple hours ago from Bloomberg.
All the time. And I guarantee it says, yeah, UN report. And, there's a really important hawk named Bill Roggio from the Foundation for Defense of Democracy.
According here, actually, sorry to cut you off. Yeah, according to a UN report, it's literally right in the article. I searched it.
That's right, because that's all they've got, dude. And then, so I saw Bill Roggio, who's this giant hawk and who's very detail-oriented, and is really a guy I've learned a lot from, even though he's horrible on stuff. But he just knows a lot about stuff, and he could be less worse on things like Syria, or could be worse on things like Syria, I mean to say. But I saw him saying, yeah, and everybody knows that Al-Qaeda is still in Afghanistan because of those UN reports. And I'm like, you really? That's the best you can do, Mr. Best Hawk with the most details out of any hawk I know. The smartest, most detail-oriented hawk I know. And that's all he's got is the UN stupid freaking reports that say nothing. And then you read claims by the military and they go, well, there's this, like a Dave Smith stand-up routine. Well, there's this young new group, Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent. Yeah, in other words, Pakistani fighters dealing with, over there messing around in Kashmir, fighting the Indians over Kashmir. Does that sound like that's got anything to do with bin Laden's war against the United States of America at all? What a absolute...
It has like crazy parallels with how they treat so-called like right-wing extremists here of like, oh, you found like 2 idiots on Facebook that said some like edgy things. And it seems like to be the same thing of like, oh, there's like a half dozen like, radical jihadis in this random country. The Taliban or Al-Qaeda are taking over. Like, we need to address this. It's like, no,
seriously,
shut up.
Makes no sense. And look, I'm not here like vouching for the Taliban, but they signed a deal. And part of the deal that they signed that said we'll get out was their side is they'll keep Al-Qaeda and ISIS down and out. As we talked about, JSOC was flying as their drone force, as their air cover fighting against ISIS just 1 year ago. Now, they want to keep that attitude up and keep us out. That should be easy. Now, the Americans can make claims, but, as far as like, let's see, part of your question there was like, about them sending more troops and more troops, maybe re-escalating the war and this kind of thing. They're not going to try to recreate a new government in Kabul and restart this war to drive the Taliban back out of power again. There's just no way in the world they're going to do that. And what's left of this little coalition, rump alliance of Northern Alliance guys in Panjshir, let's say they don't surrender and the elders in Panjshir say, no, let's all fight forever and whatever. And they do that. And then America sends in the Mercs and the CIA and JSOC and a bunch of money to help them fight. They're still going to get their asses kicked, man. They're in no position to win whatsoever. They're just not. And, there's a video about 3 weeks ago now, something like that, where a Taliban guy comes to read the riot act to a group of Hazaras. These are the Shiites who live in the middle of the country. Right. So it's the Taliban guy sitting under the tree and all the Hazara villagers around him. And he's saying to them, welcome to the New World Order, boys. That's my rough paraphrase. That this is the way it is now. And one of the things he says to them, before I lose my train of thought, because he says a lot of things. One of the things he says to them is, listen, when you had the entire power of the U.S. Army and U.S. Marine Corps and air power of the superpower at your service, you still couldn't defeat us. Now, there's talk of you guys quitting the Army and joining your own militias and trying to resist our power. But if you can't resist us with the help of the Marine Corps, what hope do you have of resisting us now? You better just give in now, before it's too late for you, pal.
And that's a compelling argument. It's a compelling argument.
Yeah. And the Hazaras are like, oh, shit. And the old man says, well, remember that time we fed you? That was cool, right? We're friends. It's all right, And like, yeah, it's pretty, pretty gangster the way they did that. So that is, transplant that argument to this, rump group of Northern Alliance Resistance Force guys up there. How could they be expected with the power that they have to fend off what's now the new National Army of Afghanistan?
With
what I mean?
Tons of drones and MRAPs and ARs.
Right. You got Taliban walking around Kabul with brand new ARs and M16s and M4s, and all the trucks, all the Humvees and all of that. I just saw one of these hawks that I follow on Twitter had a footage from 2004 that I think that was in Afghanistan. It's not Iraq. Oh, no. Pardon me. I mean to say 2014. So it's not Iraq. I guess it could have been in Syria or 14. No, it could have been Western Iraq. It was 2014. It could have been Western Iraq. But I think the footage was from Afghanistan. And it was a Humvee that was what they call a vehicle-borne IED. In other words, a truck packed with explosives and then driven usually as a suicide attack. And they show this Humvee, an American truck, and with a Taliban flag in the back. And then they show it driving around, and then they show it drive into this base, come up the driveway, and then boom, and man, a massive explosion. This is a big problem when they fought Iraq War 3.5 in Western Iraq. Was ISIS
3.5?
Yeah. There's a lot of different Iraq wars to keep track of, but yeah, Iraq War 3, I guess I should have just said there. Iraq War 3, there was the anti-ISIS war in Western Iraq, 2014 through 2017. This is a big problem. But so what could the Taliban do? if they're willing to continue doing suicide attacks, what could they do with the fleets of trucks that we've left them against some holdouts in Jalalabad? Like, this is not the battle where the battle left off in 2001. This is a totally different thing. And they've just, people can blame this on Biden all they want, and sure, it's his fault too, but it's the Pentagon that supposedly trained up this army and said that it's a good bet to leave all these weapons with them because they'll use them to defend themselves and the new government and all of this stuff, when that was just never going to be the case.
Yeah. And that leads into like a whole nother kind of question thing, because my good friends over at Slow News Day, a thing we talk about a lot is kind of the mineral wars that are going on, and how like rare earth minerals are the new oil, and there's all sorts of weird shit going all over, which I actually think we're going to talk about tomorrow, because me and you are going to be on another show, and we're going to talk about all the other wars outside of Afghanistan. They're still going on, but it's obviously early and nobody kind of knows what's going on, but I want your take on it. I've read articles from like the Washington Post and Bloomberg and all sorts of different things that are simultaneously claiming that the Afghans and the Taliban have made a deal with the United States, allowing us to send contractors in to mine this stuff, and then contradictory articles from sometimes even the same news website saying that the U.S. military is terrified because they're giving rights over to China and Russia. Is this just like neocon screaming like meltdown, or like
where's this stuff coming from? Who says that they what news source is it that says that they signed a deal with the Taliban already for this?
I think that was Bloomberg. Let me pull it up.
I'd have to take a look at that. I mean, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if Salman Khalilzad said, we could make some money working with you guys too once you win the war or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised about that, really.
So CNBC is the one that wrote the article about them giving it to China, and then CNN wrote the article about Americans trying to work a deal to get access to the mineral rights with the Taliban.
Well, I'd love to read that. I mean, I gotta tell you,
that's why I said it was really early, so I'm not sure, but I just kind of want to like throw the idea out and see like first thought, best thought on it.
I mean, look, yeah, I mean, definitely as far as early, here's what we don't know, right? Is how much power are the Taliban truly willing to share with the various warlords around the country as long as they stay in line with their goals? And how much real resistance are they going to get? In other words, how much freedom and autonomy are those warlords going to continue to demand? And are they going to be willing to fight about it? And it seems to me the Taliban has really bitten off a lot here. We don't know yet whether they can chew it all. And overall, the story of Afghanistan for 40 years is a story of total chaos. Nobody can build a pipeline across Afghanistan. Nobody can build a railroad across Afghanistan. Nobody can build the kind of infrastructure that's required to do a massive mining operation and send in, gigantic dump trucks to move all the stuff to the refining facility and all the things and whatever. All of that is absolutely impossible in Afghanistan because of the security situation, first and foremost. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Even for sovereign governments, it doesn't make sense to even waste money on mining and stuff like that. They know they build a road, somebody will blow it up. They build a pipeline. You're not even going to finish building the pipeline before somebody blows it up 10 times, right? A railroad. I mean, imagine if somebody said, yeah, what we're going to do, we're going to build a railroad across Afghanistan. Why do you think there's not a single one right now?
Yeah, that's the whole project they had, and you might be able to correct me on the year. I think it was like 2013 or something like that, where they tried to do the circular highway all the way around Afghanistan and build it, and it just constantly kept getting fucking bombed and just ruined over and over again.
And seriously, how are you even going to get locomotives to Afghanistan? The country is not just landlocked, but it's landlocked behind a mountain range. And it's the size of Texas. And it's got mountains like Colorado and deserts like California. And you can just forget it. And it's got, wild tribal warriors for a population, frankly, right? Like, even their holy men are warriors. That's their culture. And, they might hate foreigners as part of their self-identity, especially the Pashtuns. But it ain't like they're imperialist expansionists, man. They're the ones who've been defending their home turf from invader after invader after invader for centuries.
Almost without break, pretty much. Like the brief periods they weren't fighting someone else, that it collapsed in a civil war with them fighting the holdovers of the last government, pretty much.
Yeah. And seriously, like, these are bad lands. Why would you try to centralize the government there? You know, makes a foreign occupier could take over a capital city for a while, but trying to rule the wild countryside out there, why would you think that would work at all? That was weird the way "while" and "wild" sounded together there. I didn't mean to do that to you guys.
But yeah,
Anyway,
it kind of felt like just like incoherent neocon screeching of them just not knowing what to do and just like looking for any excuse to stay, and like obviously tons of contractors being like, oh well, we can't leave behind the minerals. It just seems like a bunch of pipe dreaming.
That's exactly right. I mean, I quote in Fool's Errand, I quote David Petraeus during the surge, he gives an interview to like ABC News or CNN, I guess, and says, you know, there's $1 trillion worth of minerals in there. Like, really? Oh, so that's what we're doing there, is we're just going to steal their minerals?
They did another article. That was the other CNN article that came out just today. It was like, Afghanistan is sitting on $1 trillion worth of minerals. So they wrote the same article again.
Yeah, it's seriously like, look, I mean, does it make it worse if the motive is to steal, if also that's a dumb, stupid lie? We're never even going to be able to steal the stuff. You're just tantalizing people with jewels, you know, in order to keep them killing people in a foreign nation. You know, I saw a thing. I told you I was doing Max Blumenthal's show, and he played a clip of the reporter going after Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor. And the reporter goes, "Oh my God, how in the world? Don't you think it's such a terrible, terribly jeopardizes our national security if we leave an area where we have had a presence near Iran and near Pakistan and near China and near Tajikistan?" And I'm like, Tajikistan? I'd like to watch that again to see if the rest of the crowd even flinches at that at all, or what.
Even knows that's a country, let alone like.
Yeah, Jake Sullivan picks up on that. It's like, no, I don't think we should keep our soldiers in battle in Afghanistan just so they can be near Tajikistan. Next question. And the guy's like, no, that was when. And it's like, it reminded me, this is actually an opportunity that I lost in my debate with Hirsa Ali at Freedom Fest, when she was saying if America doesn't lead the world, she starts with China. I went off on the China tangent, but she says if we don't do it, then the world could be taken over by China or Iran or Saudi Arabia. And that's when I should have done what Jake Sullivan did right there, is pick on the dumbest example that she used there and go, oh, you really think Saudi Arabia is going to take over the world if we forfeit our role as leader, huh?
I really think people dramatically underestimate that if it wasn't for the amount that we prop up the Saudi government, their own people would probably eat them. Like, we pay for their whole military. We essentially have them on like some form of welfare. We rig the economy with them through OPEC and everything. Like, the Saudi regime exists because of us. So what do you mean they're going to take over? Like, shut up.
Yeah, seriously. and really, like, think about it. Okay, forget this stupid ass example of Tajikistan. Who believes that America should stay at war in Afghanistan so that we can have a base near Iran and near China and near Pakistan, right? Like, in the event of war with China, what's this having a few thousand guys at a base in Afghanistan? Or sorry, let's start with Iran. In a war with Iran, what a few thousand guys at a couple of bases in Afghanistan, what advantage do they provide? If anything, that's the argument from my side, that they're essentially, our governments has put them as witting hostages of the Iranians to prevent war. That we can't have a war with Iran because we've got guys at bases within their missile range. And so because our government has put all our soldiers so close to Iran, that actually helps to prevent war with Iran. So that's my side's point of view. But from the empire's point of view, what advantage do they get having the Kandahar airfield and having Bagram Air Base there? That doesn't give them any strategic advantage against Iran in the event of a war there, to drop a few more bombs. when any effort against Iran, of course, would have to be a massive war waged from the Gulf and from the United States and from the Indian Ocean.
Yeah,
And
it
then-
wouldn't even be like a strategic benefit, because if things went hot, then they would just repeat what we did to the Soviets, and they would cover all of the mountains. The Hezbollah would just go up in the mountains with Stinger missiles and shoot down any planes heading over to Iran. Like, we've already lived this before. This has already happened,
Yeah, seriously. And then, so Russia, so we have the Bagram Air Base. What advantage does the Bagram Air Base give us strategically against the Russians? Are we going to house B-52s with nuclear weapons at the Bagram Air Base, where we can't even build a pipeline or a lithium mine? We're going to store H-bombs there? No, not in a million years. We're going to store H-bombs at the Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan for potential use against Russia. And if we did that, what are we going to see? We're going to see the Russians put nukes in Cuba again. Or whatever, this kind of thing. There's no reason we would want to do that anyway. It would only escalate and be bad for everyone anyway. And then same thing with China. They've got H-bombs. We can't fight them. Now, the only argument that they have that makes any sense at all there is Pakistan, because there are long-term plans to send in American forces to seize Pakistani nuclear weapons if there's ever a danger that they're going to fall into the hands of bin Ladenites. But you could conceivably wage that same mission if you accept the premise of that anyway. And you could do that from the Indian Ocean, from aircraft carriers. And I mean, you're talking about special operations raids that better win and be over quickly. If you're seasoned nukes, you better not miss, right? And
Yeah,
so
this ain't going to be like some shock and awe campaign where we're sending in a shit ton of troops in. This is all going to be CIA spooks and special forces in that situation.
What kind of, exactly right, because what kind of shock and awe campaign could you even wage from Afghanistan? Nothing. You couldn't. You could use it as a staging ground for some things and whatever, but it's certainly not a persuasive argument to continue a war in this country. It's not like we're talking about, well, we need to keep our troops in Germany where they're not that badly resented. You know what I mean? Where they're not killing anybody except, in drunk driving accidents sometimes or whatever, but where they're essentially welcome in a country at peace, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the more we stay there, the longer the war goes on, the longer innocent civilians are killed. The longer, and what right do we have to trespass in a third country that has nothing to do with Iran or Russia or China or Pakistan? And that's the best that these jackasses can do at this point. And then wait a minute. Is that guy saying that that's why we stayed this whole time? This reporter asking Jake Sullivan this, is that what his Pentagon sources told him is the important reason that we have to stay in Afghanistan? It's not to keep Al-Qaeda out. It's not to protect the women of Afghanistan from oppression and create a democracy for them and a federal nation state with regular, free and fair elections. It's because we want to lord it over the Ayatollah in the country next door. Well, that doesn't seem fair. That the only way you get to know that is if you read Foreign Affairs, or if you wait till 2021 when some, Washington, D.C. press corps scumbag uses that as an argument against the government when it finally decides to do the right thing and end the damn war.
Yeah. And definitely to cap off, on that whole point, I keep mentioning, this is from Fox, of if China and Iran, as we just talked about with the infrastructure of Afghanistan, the situation in Afghanistan, if China or Iran want to jump into that quagmire and try to do the same thing that the Russians tried to do and we tried to do, power to them, because it's probably not going to work out great for them.
What a horrible headline. Just think of the balls it takes to write that. Oh no, when, boo and who? China and Iran are going to develop those minerals, not us.
They're talking to them like they're looters, they're storming a Walmart during a riot or something. Our
exactly the same conversation we just had about the bases and proximity to these foreign countries. Are you really telling me that's why we were there? Because you thought that someday we were going to get to steal some lithium from somebody? What in the hell?
That was like one of the earliest like images that went around the internet that I think it was through Mind Unleashed, and that's how I first found antiwar.com. And I think it was a graphic that the website actually put out, but it was during like the peak of the Russiagate nonsense. And it was like, by God, look how close Russia put their country to all of our military bases. And it just had all the military bases around it. And it's like, graphics like that are really important. Like that makes you really understand like exactly what the hell is going on here.
Yep, totally right. And they, that I think was originally done about Iran. And if somebody did that about Russia, they're kind of copying that same thing. It's like, yeah, if Iran doesn't mean us harm, how come they put their country so close to all our military bases? And then there's like 50 of them all around there.
Yeah, but so I guess like the next little topic that we kind of hinted before is the ISIS thing, and kind of how we owe the Taliban a little bit on that whole ISIS front with under Obama and being the Taliban's air force, and then reports. I never dug too deep into them. I kind of just took them as truth on the surface. You can tell me if I'm wrong. That didn't we fly Taliban fighters from Afghanistan into Syria and like essentially as like mercenary fighters against ISIS during like the first couple of years of that? Or am I wrong on that?
Oh, I don't know about to fight against ISIS. No, I don't think so. I think it was to fight against Bashar al-Assad's government.
Okay, so that's I'm just crossing my million.
You're almost there though.
Groups.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not sure how they got there. I'm not going to say the Americans were flying them there. I had never heard that part. But I will tell you this, that in Afghanistan, again, America's been backing the alliance of the Hazaras, the Tajiks, and the Uzbeks against the Pashtuns. Now, of all those groups, the Hazaras are Shiites, and they're part of the coalition that we've been backing. Now, at the start, or I guess somewhat beginnings, like I guess it would have been after the end of the Afghan surge, but still during it, right? Like during 2012, I guess, you had Afghan Taliban leaving Afghanistan and going to Syria to fight in the regime change effort there, where they were fighting on the side of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and all of their allied Sunni bin Ladenite groups, and the CIA was backing that side. And the Taliban went to Syria to join them. And at the same time, the Hazaras, who are part of the coalition government that we back in Kabul, they traveled to Syria to fight on the side of Bashar al-Assad and the Iranians. In fact, it's funnier when I start the story earlier. First, you have America backing Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria, and then you have the Shiite militias from Iraq. They go to Syria to help fight on the side of the Syrian government, their army, Hezbollah, and Iran. And when the whole reason that we're backing the bin Ladenite side, the radical Sunni side in this thing, is because we're mad that the Obama government is mad that the Bush government fought Iraq War II for those same Shiite militias. So that's why we're backing the Al-Qaeda terrorists in Syria in the first place, is to spite those guys. Then they come to fight on the side of Assad. So then the Americans goes and gets the Taliban to come and fight, the Afghan Taliban, no shit, to come and fight on the side of Al-Qaeda in Syria against those guys. And then the Iranians bring the Hazaras to come and fight on Assad's side. And you couldn't make this shit up, man. It sounds like
yeah. Well,
I've actually never seen a Woody Allen film, but I've been told that this is like what you'd have in a Woody Allen film.
Because I used to work for a really small YouTube channel that did like daily updates on the Syrian war, and I would try to explain to just like normal people what the hell was going on in that country. And it's just like I just remember I had this image that showed, I think at that point in the war there was like 32 different groups, and I just showed them this map that just looked like unicorn vomit of Syria, with like, obviously like that was the point where the government was almost split in half and they had their control in the southeast of the country and then around the capital. And I'm like, this is what's going on. If this doesn't make any sense to you, it shouldn't, because it's stupid. Like it shouldn't make any sense to you at all. But yeah, like I got into an argument with some like 132,000 blue check conservative person on Twitter just the other day, where I was like, like you can scream and cry about the Taliban all you want, but your money funded and trained them. And they're like, oh, that only happened in the 70s. And I laughed because exactly like you said, like, no, we were just a couple years ago, like funding and training them in Syria to fight Assad and shit.
Yeah. I mean, that's extremely recent. Yeah. And of course, Bill Clinton's government helped them rise to power in the 90s as well, to replace the Mujahideen that the Reaganites had backed, who were tearing the country to pieces. But yeah. And look, scream and cry about the Taliban all you want. How about America and Turkey still protect Al-Qaeda in Syria, in the Idlib province, where they have their own little mini state? How come the ISIS caliphate is the worst thing in the world, but the actual Al-Qaeda caliphate, led by Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who's still sworn blood oath loyal to Ayman al-Zawahiri, the butcher in New York City, that's just fine. We don't care about that at all. Oh, I left that also. There were Uyghur fighters from China that Bill Clinton's government had helped the Taliban and the Pakistani ISI train against China in the late 90s and into the early W. Bush years in the early 2000s before September 11th. Then W. Bush put them all in Guantanamo and tortured them, then let them out, and then a bunch of their friends, they came to fight on the side of Al-Qaeda and the CIA in Syria. And so then now there's the big question about all these Uyghur fighters who fought on Al-Qaeda's side in Syria, coming home to China to cause trouble there, or at least
that's
being
a whole
protected and potentially used by the CIA against them there.
Yeah, that's a whole discussion and conversation around the Uyghurs that just never happened. Is like, I feel like 90% of people, even more than that, I almost feel like you have to be neck deep in this like we are to even understand that the Uyghurs had anything to do with Afghanistan, with Syria, with anything in the Middle East. Like,
hey, interview Patrick McFarlane from Liberty Weekly. He's done really great work on this, man.
That's good stuff. Okay, so to close out, because we're coming out at an hour, this is kind of like a pet question for me, because I kind of ask everyone I can. A lot of people in our movement went and fought alongside the Kurds over in Rojava, and I feel like that whole situation with Rojava is probably the most hotly debated subject when it comes to Syria, because every single person I talk to has a different take on it, all the way between like the anarchists that think this is like some glorious communist revolution, to like the Assad people that think it's a CIA op, to like the tanky communists who think that like it's some weird horrible offshoot of like a communist. Like, there's so many crazy opinions on Rojava. So I kind of just wanted to get like to close us out, kind of your opinion on what the hell is going on with the Kurds. Is it a similar kind of bowl of spaghetti of 100 different, we supported them, then fought them kind of thing, or what your general take on that is?
Well, if you want to do the Kurds overall, yeah. As far as the Syrian Kurds, it's not as messy as all that in terms of America's role. Essentially, once the war started, there were some Kurds at the beginning or near the beginning who had taken the side of the revolt against Assad, but I think that was over, very quickly. And essentially what happened was Assad pulled all his forces back to the west of the country, where almost all of the major cities are. Raqqa's like kind of right in the middle. They call Raqqa Eastern Syria, even though it's right in the middle in the north there, but just because relatively speaking, it's Eastern, because all the population centers pretty much are in the west there. And so they had to withdraw their forces to protect the major population centers in the west of the country. And so Syrian Kurdistan in the northeast there basically by default became free and autonomous. And so, they had their problems with the bin Ladenite types all along, I guess, but essentially kept them out for, through the first couple of years there. And then, as far as like, their bookchinist economics and whatever, and how all that was implemented and all that, I don't know a whole lot about that. All I know is that once the Islamic State declared independence from Al-Qaeda and declared a sovereign state in eastern Syria, I'm actually not sure when it started, But relatively soon after that, in fact, it might have been a whole war. A whole year. They might have waited until they attacked Western Iraq and invaded Western Iraq. Might have been when the fight against the Syrian Kurds began as well. I forget. It must have been earlier than that, but I'm sorry. I'd have to go back and look. But
it's such a mess. I don't blame you.
Look, I mean, in either case, ISIS there were like the Khmer Rouge, complete friggin' crazies, right? So not only do they carve out this state, they declare total war against everybody that borders their new state. So they declare war against the Iraqi Kurds, who are armed to the teeth, those Peshmerga guys, right, who've been independent for 20 years up there. They declare war on the Iraqi Shiites, who rule the capital city and are the supermajority of the country. They declare war on not just Assad, but also all the other bin Ladenites, all the Al-Qaeda groups and all those other groups in Syria. And they declare war on the Syrian Kurds, which really just made no sense at all. I mean, I guess strategically speaking, they wanted to seize the town of Kobani because then that's a great border crossing with the Turks for them to get resupplied with arms and finance and whatever.
And that's a whole nother fucking black hole of information you want to go into, like the Turkey ISIS, Turkey Al Qaeda.
Oh yeah, Turkey was no question. They were ISIS's number one patrons. Even after they declared themselves separate from Al Nusra and declare their own caliphate and all that crap, they're still being backed for years and years by the Turks.
Still running oil through the fucking north and everything.
Right now, I don't know whether ISIS had another choice of where they could put a border crossing, if they could go somewhere to the west of Syrian Kurdistan, or why it was that they thought the Kobani was so important that it had to be there. But they were willing to fight like dogs forever about Kobani. And then finally the Americans came in and took the Syrian Kurds side and gave them air support and put special operations guys on the ground there to give them air support and take the fight to the ISIS guys. See, once they invaded Iraq and declared the caliphate, then the policy changed. Sorta. I mean, I talk about this in the book, the nuance of it all and whatever, but certainly on the Iraqi side of the line, they waited a couple of months, make sure that Baghdad really felt like they needed us, and then they declared war against ISIS in Iraq. And then in Syria, they'd pick and choose. They could have carpet bombed the ISIS convoy when they were seizing the city of Palmyra in 2015, but they're like, no. In fact, they sat there and watched as ISIS seized Ramadi in 2015, almost a year into the war. And they were lined up ready to take Ramadi in Iraq for months, and Obama did nothing. And then they invaded the city, and then he launched an air war against them. Same kind of thing happened with the seizure of Palmyra. But at least they had decided for the anti-ISIS war on the Syrian side of the line, they would back the Syrian Kurds there. And look, the Syrian Kurds, they expanded their territory vastly. They invaded the city of Afrin, and then they got thrown right back out again with major losses and atrocities committed on both sides. They now are the ruling, at least security force, the armed power over the city of Raqqa, which is not a Kurdish city. It's populated by Arabs. And so I don't know how long that's supposed to last. They're only able to do that with American support there. And they're essentially accomplices to America's continued occupation of eastern Syria. And look, the whole panic when Trump pulled out and said, well, screw you Kurds, we're leaving. It's true. It's sort of like with the criticisms of Joe Biden about Afghanistan now.
That was the funniest part when everyone's like, Trump wouldn't do this. And I'm like, Trump kind of already did do this. What do you mean?
Exactly. And the thing is, and it was the same phony, hue and cry about it too, right? By a bunch of people who don't even know what a Kurd is or give a damn about the Kurds, but have a talking point that they want to use.
Yeah, it's super funny when you have like neocons pearl clutching over the Kurds, and then you actually go to Kurdistan, they're flying like anarcho-communist flags and talking about Bookchin. It's like,
well, the neocons are all former Trotskyites, so there's a lot of overlap there.
True.
But anyway, the thing of it is, Trump really did screw over the Kurds there, right? Like if he was smart and cared at all, what he would have done was he would have faced down his own government employees And he would have said, what we're going to do is we're going to tell the Kurds, we insist, and we really mean it. We're not sending signals here. We're telling you, you need to cut a deal with Assad right now. And you need to allow Assad to bring the Syrian Arab army in to fill the border territory. And you will lose your autonomy to a degree. I forgot to say, I meant to say at the beginning of this rant, before the war broke out, the Kurds were pretty oppressed and in a pretty unfortunate, circumstance under the control of the Assad government. It was not the happiest situation. It wasn't total oppression either. There was some autonomy there, but it was pretty ugly. But then the question is, compared to what? And compared to ISIS, shit, no problem. Compared to the Turks coming across the border in the name
that was actually going to be my last question I asked you.
Right.
Nobody's talking about how Turkey is effectively like annexing northern Syria, which is really weird to me that nobody's, discussing that. Usually if another major country, let alone a NATO ally, like occupied an invaded area without permission from NATO, without permission from the United States, and continue to expand their territory, the fucking sky would be falling in the news. But the Turks have been increasingly doing that over the last year, and nobody's talking about it. So
yeah, no, that's true. So that's the deal that Trump should have told the Kurds to take. Make your deal with Damascus. We'll bring the Syrian Arab army in there, and then we will tell the Turks, listen, you don't have a good excuse to do this because you claim that you're worried that the YPG will be a safe haven across the border for the PKK, which is mostly just propaganda. The PKK, sits in the parliament in Turkey now. The war against, their terrorist war and war of insurrection and resistance in the mountains there against the Turks has been over for some time. Their leader Öcalan is in prison, but insists that everybody be peaceful and play the political game. So the PKK is not truly a terrorist threat. At least it's a very marginal terrorist threat inside Turkey anyway. But then that's Erdogan's excuse that the YPG will give safe haven to the PKK. And then, so that's why we have to invade and seize this border territory as a buffer zone to prevent that from happening. But the obvious answer there is the Syrian Arab army should be filling that role. And that's the deal that Trump should have negotiated on the way out the door, if only to keep everybody from crying all their crocodile tears about the poor Kurds that they only just heard about, But the reality is that, look, the only reason we're there to help was to help defend them from ISIS, that U.S. policy had helped to create against them, this monster against them in the first place. So, everybody crying, oh, boo-hoo, the Turks are killing them, weren't upset that Obama had empowered this guy Baghdadi and turned him into the king of East Syria and Western Iraq for 3 years, and that his forces were committing these atrocities. These guys can't even remember last year when it comes to reporting on foreign policy. It's just whatever's the narrative of the day is all they got.
Yeah, God forbid they try to remember that Libya exists and what happened in Libya happened at all, and how much that has to do with everything.
Right.
So I see all the time from kind of younger people, because obviously it's hard for people like me and you to kind of accept this, but a lot of political discourse now is done by like Twitch and YouTube streamers that are in their 20s, and it's like, okay, so you weren't even like cognizant of politics when Libya fell. So they really think like the Syrian civil war and everything like just started with the uprising and didn't have all this backdrop and everything else that happened there. And it's super hard to explain to people.
Yep. I know it. Well, it's all in the book. I start in 79, take it all the way through. And I guess that is one thing that it actually is unique in this way, or almost unique. Max Blumenthal in Management of Savagery and Andrew Bacevich in America's War for the Middle East, I guess, do much the same thing too. But I try to take in Enough Already. I tried to take one through line and explain to you how it all fits together from 1979 all through right now, and how each one of these conflicts led to the next one and the next one and the next one all the way through for you.
Yes.
There. So
buy Scott's book. It's in the other room. I have it. Like,
any of you kiddos need to know what happened. There's your story.
Yeah, especially the younger folks that that haven't followed this all the way through of everything that crazy is happening. It can be overwhelming, but like the book does a great job just leading you through it, because it seems like there's 100 moving pieces, but it really is kind of this one continuous through line that has led to all of these things, the similar mistakes, the similar fuck ups, the same names keep coming up. So definitely get Scott's book. And then, like I said, Scott's coming to speak at this. This is pretty huge. There's going to be a lot of interesting characters here, and we're really excited about it. And we're trying to desperately fucking jumpstart the anti-war movement because, as I'm sure we're going to talk about tomorrow, which you guys check out, me and Scott are going to be on another podcast. As Afghanistan ends, they are trying to expand into Somalia. They are trying to expand into Ethiopia. They're opening all these new little theaters, and USAID is running all over, and the CIA is doing their shit. So just because the Afghan war ended, which we'll see if it even has ended, I'll never put it past the U.S. military to just continue to fuck up again. We thought Iraq was done, and then we reinvaded 2.5 other times after that. So we'll see. But yeah, it's going to be super exciting. So Scott, you're a very, very, very busy man. So plug your stuff. Let people know. Are you going to be on any shows in upcoming future where people can find you? All your links, all that.
Well, I did a bunch of shows this week. You can find all that at Libertarian Institute on the blog there. So I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org. I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com. I do the Scott Horton show. I got 5,570 something interviews going back to 2003 for you there at scotthorton.org and at youtube.com/Scott Horton show. And the books are The Great Ron Paul, transcripts of all my Ron Paul interviews between 2004 and 2019. And then Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And you can find all those at libertarianinstitute.org/books.
Hell yeah, great stuff. Thanks y'all for tuning in. Sorry we were late, but all my viewers are pretty much used to this because we're always late. And appreciate everybody tuning in. And thanks, Scott. And I'll catch y'all next week. We're probably going to do something a little more interesting, a little weirder, and I think y'all will like it. So I'll announce that when it comes out. But after that, catch y'all later. Y'all have a good night.